The alarm screamed through the Galactic Council monitoring station as waves of distress signals flooded every communication channel. Commander Lee Dae-ho stood at the main display watching red warning lights flash across 17 star systems in the outer rim. The signals all carried the same desperate message from the Villani civilization. Emergency evacuation protocols activated throughout the massive space station as thousands of alien diplomats and military officers rushed to their emergency stations. The crystalline towers of the Villani homeworld appeared on the main screen, showing cities that had stood for 10,000 years now dark and silent. Dr. Park Yoon-ji pushed through the crowd of panicking aliens to reach the communication console. Her hands moved quickly across the controls as she tried to establish contact with any surviving Villani ships. The static-filled responses she received painted a horrifying picture of complete system collapse. The first clear transmission came from a damaged Villani bioship, limping away from their third moon. The captain spoke in broken galactic standard as his voice shook with terror. His words described creatures that consumed everything in their path, leaving only dead rock behind. These beings called themselves the Devourers, and they showed no interest in communication or mercy. Ambassador Cho Min-soo arrived at the emergency session as alien representatives filled the great chamber. The Villani ambassador stood at the center podium with tears streaming down her pale blue face. Her people faced complete extinction within days as the Devourer swarm moved toward their homeworld with unstoppable hunger. The debate that followed revealed the true nature of galactic civilization. Species after species offered sympathy and promises of refugee assistance, but none volunteered military support. The Altarian Empire suggested establishing quarantine zones around the affected systems. The Zephyrian Commonwealth recommended evacuation, ships to save what population remained. Council records showed previous encounters with similar swarm entities across galactic history. Every civilization that faced the Devourers either fled or died. Energy weapons proved useless as the creatures adapted within minutes. Antimatter charges only slowed their advance temporarily. Even planet-killer weapons barely dented their massive swarms. Dr. Park studied the tactical reports from failed defense attempts over the past 3 centuries. The Corvin defense fleet had thrown everything at a smaller Devourer swarm 50 years ago. Their sophisticated shield technology and plasma cannons had destroyed thousands of the creatures, but millions more kept coming. The Corvins abandoned 17 worlds before the swarm finally moved on to consume uninhabited systems. The pattern remained consistent across every encounter. The Devourers would arrive without warning and begin systematic consumption of all matter in a system. They showed particular interest in populated worlds where they could harvest both organic and technological resources. Their numbers grew exponentially with each world consumed as they converted raw materials into more of their kind. Ambassador Cho listened to the debate with growing frustration as speaker after speaker offered excuses for inaction. The hegemony. Representative explained how his people lacked military vessels capable of interstellar combat. The Confederation delegate described budget constraints that prevented immediate military response. Even the mighty Dominion claimed their forces were committed elsewhere. The Villani ambassador made one final plea, as images of her dying homeworld filled the chamber screens. Devourer swarms had already consumed the outer continents and were moving toward the last population centers. Her people had perhaps 18 hours before complete extinction. She begged for any assistance the council could provide. Most representatives looked away as the transmission ended. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Every previous military response had failed catastrophically. The Devourers had consumed 43 civilizations over recorded history. No known weapon or tactic had ever stopped them once they established momentum. The logical response was containment and evacuation. Ambassador Cho stood slowly and walked to the speaker podium. His presence caused murmurs throughout the chamber, as Earth remained one of the newest council members. Humans had joined galactic civilization only 50 years earlier, and most species still considered them barely civilized primitives from a death world. The human representative activated his communication device and spoke clearly into the chamber. He announced that Earth would respond to the Villani distress call immediately. The statement caused an explosion of shocked voices as alien delegates protested the absurdity of the proposal. The Altarian ambassador pointed out that humans possessed no advanced energy weapons or sophisticated shield technology. Their ships used primitive chemical rockets and crude kinetic weapons that belonged in museums. Even their newest vessels relied on nuclear fusion. Rather than proper antimatter systems, Dr. Park stepped forward to support her ambassador as alien voices rose in protest. She had studied human military history during her xenobiology training and understood what others missed. Humans came from a world where survival required constant struggle against predators, climate disasters, and resource scarcity. They approached warfare differently than civilized species. The hegemony delegate laughed openly at the suggestion that Deathworld savages could succeed where advanced civilizations had failed. He reminded the chamber that humans still engaged in close combat with handheld weapons when proper species used automated defense systems. Their tactical doctrine emphasized aggression and acceptable losses, rather than preservation and minimal casualties. Ambassador Cho ignored the protests and activated an emergency communication protocol. The signal reached Earth within minutes, and the response came faster than anyone expected. Admiral Kim Tae-won appeared on screen from the Sol System Military Command Center. Behind him, dozens of officers moved with urgent purpose as alert sirens wailed. The admiral reported that 17 battle fleets were beginning immediate mobilization. The largest military force in human history would depart for Volani space within 72 hours. His calm voice and confident manner contrasted sharply with the panicked responses from other species facing similar threats. The alien delegates stared in shock as Admiral Kim described the force composition. 847 combat vessels ranging from massive dreadnoughts to small fighter squadrons. The humans planned to engage the Devourers in direct combat rather than attempt evacuation or containment strategies, Dr. Park tried to explain human psychology to the confused alien representatives. Humans evolved on a world where every day brought new threats to survival. They developed strong pack bonding and protective instincts toward allied species. When faced with extinction threats, they responded with increased aggression rather than retreat. The Zephyrian delegate questioned the wisdom of sending primitive weapons against enemies that had adapted to advanced galactic technology. Ambassador Cho smiled grimly and explained that sometimes primitive solutions worked when sophisticated approaches failed. Humans specialized in finding unconventional answers to impossible problems. As the emergency session continued, reports arrived from Earth showing unprecedented military activity. Every major shipyard worked around the clock loading vessels with weapons and supplies. Volunteer crews signed up faster than ships could accommodate them. The entire human military machine focused on a single objective with terrifying efficiency. The Volani ambassador watched the preparations with desperate hope. Her people had perhaps 12 hours remaining before the final population centers fell to devourer consumption. The fastest human ships would arrive barely in time if they departed immediately. Even then, the odds of success seemed impossibly. Small Ambassador Cho made one final statement to the chamber before departing for Earth. He reminded the assembled delegates that humans understood desperate situations better than most species. They had survived Ice Age's asteroid impacts and global wars through cooperation and determination. The Devourers represented just another extinction threat to overcome. The alien representatives watched in bewildered silence as the human delegation left for their ships. Most considered the mission a noble but futile gesture. The Devourers had consumed civilizations far more advanced than humanity. Deathworld primitives armed with chemical explosives and kinetic weapons stood no chance against adaptive biomechanical swarms. Dr. Park felt a mixture of pride and terror as she boarded the human transport vessel. Her species was about to face the most dangerous enemy in galactic history with weapons their allies considered obsolete. Yet something deep in her evolutionary memory whispered that sometimes the most dangerous predator was the one everyone underestimated. The transport departed as Earth's defensive fleets moved into attack formation. Across 17 star systems, the largest human armada ever assembled prepared for war against an enemy that had never known defeat. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if Deathworld savages could succeed where advanced civilizations had failed. Admiral Kim Tae-won stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought Indomitable as 17 human battle fleets moved through hyperspace toward Volani territory. The largest military force in human history stretched across multiple light years with 847 vessels, ranging from kilometer-long battleships to nimble fighter squadrons. The command bridge buzzed with activity as officers coordinated the complex logistics of moving an entire armada across galactic space. Unlike the elegant energy-based systems preferred by other species, human vessels bristled with kinetic weapons, nuclear warheads, and chemical explosives. Technologies that most aliens had abandoned thousands of years ago as primitive and inefficient. Captain Yoon Hye-jin reported from the stealth ship Shadow Strike as her vessel scouted ahead of the main force. Her ship represented the pinnacle of human stealth technology, using heat dampeners and electromagnetic shields to avoid detection. The sleek black vessel carried enough firepower to destroy a small city. Despite being classified as a reconnaissance craft, Major Shin Woo-bin reviewed deployment plans for the orbital drop marines from his assault transport. His troops trained constantly during the journey, practicing boarding actions and close combat techniques that horrified alien observers. Each marine carried weapons designed for fighting in confined spaces, including flamethrowers, explosive charges, and even sharpened metal blades for when ammunition ran low. Engineer Hong Soo-min worked frantically in the weapons bay, calibrating the targeting systems for humanity's most devastating weapons. The Planet Cracker missiles represented human engineering at its most destructive, with each warhead capable of shattering continental plates. Most galactic civilizations considered such weapons barbaric and unnecessarily destructive. Dr. Park Yoon-ji briefed the command staff on everything the galaxy knew about devourer biology and tactics. The creatures existed as a hybrid of organic tissue and mechanical components that allowed rapid adaptation to different environments and threats. Previous encounters showed they possessed collective intelligence that coordinated attacks across multiple star systems. The tactical analysis revealed why every previous defense had failed catastrophically. The Devourers consumed matter to create more of their kind in an exponential growth pattern that overwhelmed any opposition through sheer numbers. Their adaptive biology allowed them to develop resistance to energy weapons within minutes of first contact. Captain Yoon proposed a strategy that exemplified human military thinking. Instead of trying to outrun or hide from the Devourers, her reconnaissance ships would actively seek contact to identify command structures and coordination nodes. The plan called for deliberate engagement rather than the evasion tactics preferred by other species. The alien observers embedded with the human fleet expressed growing concern as they listened to tactical discussions. Humans spoke about acceptable casualty rates and calculated sacrifices with disturbing casualness. Their weapon systems seemed designed for maximum destruction rather than the precision strikes favored by civilized species. Engineer Hong demonstrated the Planet Cracker targeting system to a group of Villani military advisors. The massive missile could penetrate planetary crust and detonate in the molten core, causing global earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. When one Villani observer fainted from shock at the destructive potential, Hong seemed genuinely puzzled by their reaction. Admiral Kim explained human strategic doctrine to his increasingly worried alien allies. Earth military thinking emphasized overwhelming force applied at critical points rather than gradual escalation. They preferred decisive battles over prolonged conflicts and considered total victory worth significant losses. The philosophical differences between human and galactic military thinking became apparent during planning sessions. Most species focused on preserving their forces and minimizing casualties, even if it meant accepting strategic defeats. Humans calculated acceptable losses against mission objectives and chose victory over survival when forced to choose. Major Shin described boarding action procedures that left alien observers speechless with horror. Human Marines trained to fight in hand-to-hand combat when their weapons failed, using knives, clubs, and even improvised weapons fashioned from debris. They considered close combat a normal part of warfare, rather than a desperate last resort. The psychological profiles of human military personnel disturbed the galactic observers even more than their weapons. Volunteers had signed up for the mission, faster than ships could accommodate them, despite knowing they faced an enemy that had never been defeated. Many seemed excited about the prospect of combat, rather than afraid. Dr. Park tried to explain human evolution to her confused alien colleagues. Humanity had survived countless extinction events on their homeworld, through adaptation, cooperation, and controlled aggression. They viewed warfare as problem-solving rather than tragedy, and approached impossible odds with determination rather than despair. The Vallani liaison officer struggled to understand human tactical discussions about ramming attacks and suicide runs. Such concepts seemed impossible to her people, who had evolved in peaceful garden worlds without natural predators. The idea of deliberately sacrificing vessels and crews for tactical advantage violated every principle of civilized warfare. Engineer Hong worked with human physicists to calculate optimal trajectories for kinetic bombardment of devourer formations. The plan involved using mass and velocity, rather than exotic energy to penetrate adaptive defenses. Simple physics applied with overwhelming force might succeed where sophisticated weapons had failed. Captain Yoon reported from her advanced scouts that devourer swarms had consumed 3 more Vallani worlds during their journey. The enemy showed no signs of slowing their advance or adapting their tactics. They continued systematic consumption of all matter in each system before moving to the next target. The human fleet adjusted course to intercept the devourers before they could reach the Vallani homeworld. Admiral Kim calculated they would arrive with perhaps 6 hours to spare if their hyperspace jumps remained on schedule. The margin for error had shrunk to almost nothing, but the humans showed no signs of panic or despair. Major Shin briefed his Marines on fighting techniques specifically designed for combating adaptive biomechanical entities. The training emphasized overwhelming the enemy's ability to adapt through rapid changes in tactics and weapon types. If the devourers could adjust to energy weapons within minutes, humans would switch weapons every few seconds. The psychological warfare potential of human tactics became apparent during combat simulations. Species that had never encountered close combat or ramming attacks might be vulnerable to the shock of facing opponents who embraced such strategies. Fear could be as effective as firepower against enemies that had never experienced it. Dr. Park studied reports from the few survivors of previous devourer encounters and noticed an interesting pattern. The creatures showed excellent adaptation to technological threats but seemed less effective against biological or chemical attacks. Human weapons like flamethrowers and toxic gases might prove more effective than plasma cannons. Engineer Hong completed modifications to the fleet's nuclear arsenal that would maximize damage against biomechanical targets. The warheads would detonate in multiple stages, creating overlapping radiation fields that might overwhelm devourer repair systems. Even if they survived the initial explosion, the lingering radiation could prevent regeneration. Admiral Kim addressed the entire fleet as they prepared to drop out of hyperspace near Vallani territory. His message emphasized that they represented not just humanity, but the principle that aggressive action could succeed where passive defense had failed. They would show the galaxy that Deathworld savages could protect civilized species. The final approach to Vallani space revealed the true scale of the disaster. 3 garden worlds that had supported billions of inhabitants now appeared as lifeless rocks, stripped of atmosphere and surface features. The devourer swarms had consumed everything, including the planetary cores, leaving only empty shells. Captain Yoon transmitted initial reconnaissance data, showing devourer fleet compositions that dwarfed anything in previous encounters. The enemy had grown exponentially during their consumption of Vallani territory, and now fielded millions of biomechanical ships. The human armada faced odds of over 1,000 to 1. Major Shin prepared his Marines for immediate deployment as soon as the fleet engaged the enemy. Human doctrine called for boarding actions to begin while ship-to-ship combat continued, rather than waiting for space superiority. The Marines would fight their way aboard devourer vessels while the battle still raged. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation as alarms wailed throughout the devourer swarms. For the first time in galactic history, an enemy had chosen to advance toward the consumers rather than flee. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine whether Deathworld aggression could triumph over adaptive evolution. The human armada emerged from hyperspace to find 3 Vallani garden worlds reduced to barren rock as massive devourer swarms consumed the last traces of organic matter. The beautiful crystalline cities that had stood for millennia lay in ruins. While biomechanical entities converted the debris into more of their kind, Captain Bae So-young watched from the bridge of the heavy cruiser Thunderstrike as the remaining Vallani bioships fought a desperate retreat toward their homeworld. The elegant vessels fired streams of coherent energy, that dispersed harmlessly against adaptive Devourer armor, while enemy boarding pods carved through their hulls like knives through paper. Lieutenant Kang Ji-hun led his fighter squadron in the first human engagement against Devourer forces. His nimble craft dove toward a cluster of enemy ships while launching salvos of kinetic rounds that punched through biomechanical armor with devastating effect. The creature's ability to adapt to energy weapons proved useless against simple mass and velocity. The initial attack results shocked both human and alien observers. Devourer vessels that had shrugged off plasma cannons and particle beams began exploding under the impact of primitive kinetic rounds. Their adaptive biology simply could not evolve fast enough to counter weapons that relied on basic physics rather than exotic energy. Sergeant Lim A-Ra prepared her boarding team as Thunderstrike closed with a damaged Devourer command ship. The massive biomechanical vessel writhed like a wounded animal, while its adaptive systems tried to repair hull breaches caused by human railgun fire. Emergency docking procedures began as the sergeant checked her flamethrower fuel levels. The first human boarding action against a Devourer vessel exceeded all expectations for violence and effectiveness. Sergeant Lim led her Marines through corridors filled with organic machinery, while using flamethrowers and explosive charges to clear their path. The sight of humans fighting with handheld weapons horrified the Devourers as much as their alien allies. Lieutenant Kang coordinated fighter attacks that demonstrated the psychological impact of human tactical doctrine. His pilots performed ramming runs against Devourer command nodes with their ships loaded with explosive charges. The willingness to sacrifice vessels and crews for tactical advantage created chaos in enemy formations that had never faced such tactics. Captain Bay directed close-range bombardment of Devourer bioships using weapons that most galactic civilizations considered obsolete. Nuclear warheads and chemical explosives proved devastatingly effective against adaptive armor that had been designed to counter energy-based attacks. The enemy faced weapons they had never encountered before. The Volani survivors transmitted desperate messages of amazement as human forces tore through Devourer formations that had seemed invincible. Ships that had resisted their most advanced weapons succumbed to primitive kinetic rounds and chemical explosives. The tide of battle began shifting for the first time in recorded Devourer encounters. Sergeant Lim reported from inside a captured Devourer vessel as her Marines used melee weapons to destroy biomechanical control nodes. The creatures seemed genuinely afraid of humans who fought with knives and clubs when their guns ran empty. Hand-to-hand combat violated every principle of their evolutionary experience. The psychological warfare aspects of human tactics became apparent as Devourer coordination began breaking down. These entities had consumed 43 civilizations by overwhelming them with numbers and adaptive technology. They had never faced opponents who fought harder when cornered or who actually enjoyed close combat. Lieutenant Kang led another wave of ramming attacks that left Devourer commanders struggling to maintain formation discipline. The sight of human pilots deliberately crashing their ships into enemy vessels while screaming battle cries over open channels created panic in biomechanical minds that had never experienced fear. Captain Bay coordinated the first successful capture of an intact Devourer command ship as human Marines cleared the vessel deck by deck. The biomechanical crew retreated deeper into their ship rather than face humans in close combat. For creatures that had never known defeat, the experience of being outfought proved psychologically devastating. The tactical advantages of human weapons became apparent as the battle continued. Kinetic rounds required no exotic materials or complex targeting systems, while chemical explosives could be manufactured from common elements. Human logistics proved far simpler than the energy-intensive systems used by other galactic species. Dr. Park analyzed captured Devourer biosamples and discovered why human weapons prove so effective. The creature's adaptive biology focused on countering energy-based threats, while treating kinetic damage as environmental hazard rather than deliberate attack. Their healing system simply could not cope with the massive trauma caused by explosive rounds. The Devourer swarms began demonstrating behavior patterns that no previous encounter had recorded. Individual bioships started retreating from human advance forces rather than pressing their numerical advantage. The psychological impact of facing opponents who embraced rather than feared combat disrupted their collective intelligence. Sergeant Lim established the first permanent human beachhead inside a Devourer hive ship as her expanded marine force captured critical systems. The biomechanical vessel began shutting down as humans severed neural connections with improvised tools, ranging from plasma cutters to sharpened metal bars. Lieutenant Kang reported that Devourer fighter formations were avoiding direct engagement with human squadrons despite overwhelming numerical superiority. The enemy seemed genuinely confused by opponents who used ramming attacks as standard tactics rather than desperate last resorts. The battle reached a turning point when Captain Bay coordinated a massed kinetic bombardment of the largest Devourer bioship. Hundreds of railgun rounds and missile warheads overwhelmed the creature's adaptive defenses through sheer volume rather than exotic technology. The massive vessel broke apart in a chain reaction of secondary explosions. Human casualties mounted steadily, but morale remained high as crews volunteered for increasingly dangerous missions. The willingness to accept losses in pursuit of victory contrasted sharply with galactic military doctrine that emphasized preservation over tactical success. Deathworld evolution had produced warriors rather than soldiers. The Volani fleet rallied behind human formations as their confidence returned for the first time since the Devourer invasion began. The sight of biomechanical ships retreating from human attack forces inspired desperate hope among the survivors of 17 consumed worlds. Dr. Park transmitted updated tactical recommendations based on battlefield observations. Human weapons worked best when applied in rapid succession to prevent Devourer adaptation, while boarding actions should focus on destroying biomechanical control nodes rather than attempting to capture vessels intact. Sergeant Lim led joint human Volani boarding, teams that combined human aggression with alien technical expertise. The partnership proved devastatingly effective as Volani biotechnology enhanced human weapons, while human tactics overcame Volani tactical limitations. The first phase of combat ended with human forces controlling 3 captured Devourer vessels and orbital superiority around the outer Volani worlds. Enemy formations had withdrawn toward the system's inner planets, while their command structure struggled to develop countermeasures against primitive weapons. Lieutenant Kang prepared his surviving pilots for the next engagement as replacement fighters arrived from the main human fleet. The enemy had adapted somewhat to ramming attacks by improving their point defense systems, but still seemed psychologically vulnerable to human aggression. Captain Bay coordinated resupply operations that highlighted another human advantage over galactic military forces. Human logistics relied on simple chemical reactions and basic manufacturing rather than exotic matter synthesis. Ammunition could be produced from asteroids while fuel came from hydrogen harvesting. The psychological impact of the first engagement extended beyond immediate tactical results. Devourer forces that had never retreated from battle now showed signs of genuine fear when facing human formations. The galaxy's most dangerous predators had encountered something even more dangerous than themselves. As the human fleet regrouped for the next phase of combat, reports arrived from Earth, showing massive industrial mobilization. Every shipyard and weapons factory worked around the clock producing reinforcements and supplies. The entire human civilization had committed to total war against an enemy they barely understood. The stage was set for the largest space battle in galactic history as both sides prepared for a confrontation that would determine whether Deathworld savagery could triumph over adaptive evolution. The Devourers faced their first real challenge, while humanity prepared to prove that sometimes the most dangerous predator was the one everyone underestimated. Admiral Kim Tae-wan studied the tactical displays showing Devourer formations regrouping around a massive biomechanical structure the size of a small moon. The central hive mind coordinated millions of enemy vessels while consuming the inner planets of the Volani system. Intelligence reports indicated this organism served as the primary command node for the entire swarm commander. Na Dong-hyun prepared his stealth fleet for the most dangerous mission in human military history. 12 ships equipped with experimental cloaking technology would attempt to penetrate Devourer defenses and strike at their hive mind, while the main fleet provided distraction through frontal assault. Colonel Go Yuri coordinated orbital bombardment protocols from her command ship as targeting data flowed in from reconnaissance drones. The plan called for systematic destruction of 3 dead worlds to deny their resources to the enemy, while eliminating millions of Devourers in the process. Captain John Minho volunteered to lead the suicide squadron that would create an opening for Commander Na's strike force. His 12 ships loaded themselves with nuclear warheads and prepared for a ramming attack that would breach the hive mind's protective barriers through overwhelming explosive force. The fundamental difference between human and galactic military thinking became apparent as Admiral Kim explained the battle plan to his alien observers. Most species would attempt to negotiate or find diplomatic solutions even when facing extinction. Humans calculated acceptable losses and chose tactics that guaranteed victory, regardless of cost. Commander Na's stealth ships moved through the outer system using heat dampeners and electromagnetic shields to avoid detection. The vessels carried enough firepower to destroy a city but relied on surprise rather than overwhelming force. Each ship contained hand-picked crews who understood they might not return. The main human fleet began its frontal assault on Devourer formations with devastating kinetic bombardments that overwhelmed adaptive defenses through sheer volume. Thousands of railgun rounds and missile warheads created a wall of destruction that forced enemy ships to retreat toward their central hive. Mind Colonel Go initiated the first phase of her planet-killing bombardment as nuclear warheads rained down on the closest dead world. The surface erupted in chains of explosions that penetrated deep into the planetary core, while eliminating Devourer mining operations that had been converting rock into biomechanical ships. Captain John led his suicide squadron through increasingly heavy enemy fire as Devourer point defense systems tried desperately to stop the approaching threat. His pilots maintained perfect formation despite taking massive casualties, while their ships groaned under the weight of nuclear payloads. The psychological impact of human tactics continued disrupting Devourer coordination as biomechanical ships retreated rather than press their numerical advantage. The creatures had evolved to overwhelm opponents through adaptive superiority, but faced enemies who embraced destruction as readily as they did. Commander Na reported successful penetration of the outer defense perimeter as his stealth ships closed on the massive hive mind. The biomechanical organism pulsed with bioluminescent displays, while coordinating attacks across multiple star systems. Its destruction would cripple Devourer operations throughout the galaxy. The second planet-killing bombardment began as Colonel Go targeted the largest Devourer manufacturing complex. Antimatter warheads turned entire continents into molten slag, while eliminating production facilities that had been creating thousands of enemy ships per day. Captain John's squadron broke through the final defensive line as enemy fire concentrated on stopping their approach. Half his ships had been destroyed, but the survivors maintained course toward the hive mind's protective barriers. The pilots sang ancient human war songs as they prepared for impact. Admiral Kim coordinated the climactic assault as human forces struck simultaneously from multiple directions. The frontal attack drew Devourer attention, while stealth forces approached their primary target, and suicide squadrons prepared to breach defensive barriers through calculated sacrifice. The first ramming attack struck the hive mind's shields with the force of multiple nuclear explosions as Captain John's squadron fulfilled their mission. The protective barriers flickered and weakened under the assault, while emergency alerts echoed through Devourer communication networks. Commander Na led his strike force through the gap created by the suicide attack as biomechanical defenses scrambled to respond. His ships launched every weapon they carried at the exposed sections of the hive mind, while enemy fire converged on their positions. Colonel Go completed her third planet-killing bombardment as the remaining dead world disappeared in a chain reaction of nuclear explosions. The systematic destruction denied the Devourers access to raw materials, while demonstrating human willingness to render entire worlds uninhabitable rather than allow enemy occupation. The hive mind began showing signs of damage as Commander Na's attack penetrated its outer layers. Biomechanical repair systems struggled to cope with kinetic rounds and chemical explosives, while the organism's coordination of distant fleets became increasingly erratic. Dr. Ryu Haiwan led medical teams in treating casualties from the suicide attack while continuing to serve as frontline fighters when enemy boarding parties threatened the medical bay. Her transformation from healer to warrior exemplified the human response to existential threats. The massive biomechanical organism writhed in apparent pain as human weapons tore through its neural networks. For the first time in galactic history, A devourer hive mind experienced something resembling fear. As its invulnerability proved to be an illusion, Master Chief Seo Jinwoo coordinated boarding actions against damaged devourer vessels while leading joint human-Villani assault teams. His tactical innovations included using alien biotechnology to enhance human weapons, while maintaining the aggressive combat doctrine that had proven so effective. Commander Na transmitted final targeting data as his ships prepared for their own ramming attack against the hive mind's core. The stealth fleet had accomplished its mission, but faced certain destruction as devourer forces converged on their position. The crews accepted their fate with the same calm determination that characterized human military culture. The climactic moment arrived as Admiral Kim ordered the entire surviving fleet to begin ramming attacks against the weakened hive mind. Ship after ship accelerated toward the massive organism, while their crews prepared for ultimate sacrifice in pursuit of victory. The psychological breakthrough came when individual devourer bioships began fleeing rather than defending their central command node. The creatures that had consumed 43 civilizations finally encountered opponents more savage than themselves and found the experience traumatic beyond their ability to process. Captain John's sacrifice had created the opening that allowed the entire human strategy to succeed. His 12 ships had died to prove that calculated losses could achieve what preservation-focused tactics could not. The willingness to embrace destruction as a tool of war distinguished humans from every other galactic species. The hive minds' death throes sent shockwaves through the biomechanical swarms as their coordination collapsed completely. Millions of devourer vessels found themselves without central command, while facing human forces that showed no interest in mercy or negotiation. Admiral Kim prepared for the final assault as his flagship Indomitable loaded every nuclear warhead in its arsenal. The massive dreadnought would deliver the killing blow through a ramming attack that would destroy both ship and target. The crew accepted their mission with pride rather than fear. The galaxy watched in amazement as Deathworld savages accomplished what advanced civilizations had deemed impossible. Human tactical doctrine based on acceptable losses and calculated sacrifice had broken an enemy that adaptive technology could not defeat. Master Chief Seo led the final boarding action against the dying hive mind as human marines fought their way through collapsing biomechanical corridors. Their mission was to ensure complete destruction of the organism's core functions, while the fleet prepared for its ultimate attack. The stage was set for humanity's greatest sacrifice as Admiral Kim gave the order for final approach. The Indomitable accelerated toward the hive mind's exposed core, while every crew member prepared to join the heroes who had died to make victory possible. Fleet Admiral Oh Kyung-soo assumed command of the human forces as Admiral Kim Tae-won guided the Indomitable toward its final ramming attack against the massive hive mind. The dying biomechanical organism pulsed with desperate energy while its coordination of the remaining devourer swarms collapsed into chaos. Dr. Ryu Hae-won led the defense of a Villani refugee ship as devourer boarding parties made desperate attempts to capture fresh biological material. When medical supplies ran out, she fashioned explosive devices from surgical equipment and continued fighting as an improvised combat engineer. Her willingness to transform from healer to warrior exemplified humanity's response to extinction threats. Master Chief Seo Jin-woo coordinated the final assault on the hive mind's core structure as joint human-Villani teams fought through collapsing biomechanical corridors. His tactical innovation of combining human aggression with alien biotechnology created weapons that neither species could have developed alone. The psychological warfare aspects of human combat doctrine reached their climax as devourer forces began retreating from battles they could have won through numerical superiority. The creatures that had consumed 43 civilizations found themselves psychologically broken by opponents who embraced death as readily as Victory Fleet Admiral O implemented the ultimate human strategy as every surviving ship in the Armada prepared for coordinated ramming attacks. The tactic violated every principle of galactic military thinking, but represented the logical conclusion of Deathworld evolution, where survival required absolute commitment to group objectives. The Indomitable struck the hive mind's exposed core with the force of a small star as Admiral Kim detonated every nuclear warhead aboard his flagship. The massive explosion tore through biomechanical neural networks while sending shockwaves across the entire organism. Emergency alerts echoed through Devourer communication channels as their central coordination began failing. Dr. Ryu transmitted her final medical report while leading a desperate charge against Devourer forces, attempting to overrun the refugee ship. Her improvised weapons combined human engineering with alien materials to create devastatingly effective anti-personnel devices. The sight of a human doctor fighting with surgical tools converted into explosives horrified enemy troops. Master Chief Seo reached the hive mind's primary neural cluster as the massive organism convulsed in its death throes. His joint assault team used a combination of human flamethrowers and Villani bioacids to destroy the creature's core consciousness while dodging falling debris from the collapsing structure. The cascade failure began as secondary explosions rippled through the hive mind's biomechanical systems. Fleet Admiral O coordinated additional ramming attacks by the surviving human vessels to ensure complete destruction of the creature's backup neural networks. Ship after ship crashed into the dying organism while their crews sang human war songs. The death of the central hive mind triggered panic throughout the remaining Devourer swarms, as millions of biomechanical ships found themselves without coordination or purpose. Individual vessels began fleeing the system, rather than continue fighting against opponents who had proven more savage than themselves. Dr. Ryu led joint human-Villani medical teams in treating casualties from the final battle, while continuing to serve as combat engineers when needed. Her dual role as healer and warrior demonstrated humanity's ability to adapt any profession to military necessity when facing extinction threats. The psychological breakthrough reached completion as Devourer bioships began surrendering rather than face human boarding parties. The creatures that had never known fear found themselves traumatized by encounters with opponents who fought harder when wounded and sang while dying. Master Chief Seo coordinated the systematic destruction of remaining Devourer manufacturing facilities, while leading combined assault teams through the ruins of consumed worlds. His tactical doctrine emphasized complete elimination of enemy infrastructure to prevent any possibility of swarm regeneration. Fleet Admiral O directed the final phase of combat as human ships hunted down fleeing Devourer vessels throughout the system. The pursuit demonstrated another aspect of human military thinking that confused galactic observers. Where other species would accept enemy withdrawal, humans insisted on total victory. The cost of victory became apparent as casualty reports arrived from across the human fleet. Over 200,000 personnel had died in the battle, including Admiral Kim and Captain Jeon, along with their entire crews. Yet human morale remained high as survivors celebrated the successful completion of their mission. Dr. Ryu established field hospitals on the liberated Villani homeworld, while continuing to develop new weapons from medical equipment. Her innovations included bioacids that dissolved Devourer armor and healing compounds that accelerated human recovery from combat injuries. The strategic implications of human victory began spreading throughout galactic civilization as news of the battle reached other species. The Devourer threat that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries lay defeated by Deathworld primitives using obsolete weapons and barbaric tactics. Master Chief Seo led reconstruction efforts on devastated worlds while training Villani volunteers in human combat techniques. His mixed units combined alien technical expertise with human tactical doctrine to create defensive forces capable of resisting future threats. Fleet Admiral O addressed the Galactic Council via emergency transmission as human construction fleets arrived to begin rebuilding the devastated Villani worlds. His message emphasized that Deathworld evolution had produced protectors as well as warriors. The aftermath revealed the true scope of human commitment as volunteer fleets continued arriving from Earth with relief supplies and reconstruction equipment. The same civilization that had fought with terrifying savagery now demonstrated equal dedication to healing and rebuilding. Dr. Ryu published her combat medical innovations for use by other galactic species, while establishing permanent research facilities on the liberated worlds. Her work demonstrated how human adaptability could transform any field of knowledge into tools for survival and protection. The psychological impact on galactic civilization proved as significant as the military victory. Species that had dismissed humans as primitive savages now requested military advisors and defensive treaties. The galaxy's understanding of effective warfare underwent fundamental revision. Master Chief Seo became the first human to receive the Galactic Medal of Valor for his role in developing joint human-alien combat techniques. His innovations proved that cooperation could enhance rather than diminish the effectiveness of human tactical doctrine. The final tally showed 73 surviving human ships from the original 847-vessel Armada. Yet no human voice called the price too high for eliminating a threat that had consumed 43 civilizations. Deathworld thinking calculated acceptable losses differently than civilized species. Fleet Admiral O established the first permanent human military base outside Sol system, while coordinating ongoing security operations throughout former Devourer territory. His forces would ensure that no remnant of the swarm survived to threaten galactic civilization again. Dr. Ryu received the position of Chief Medical Officer for the new Galactic Defense Force, while continuing her research into combining human and alien technologies. Her dual expertise in healing and warfare made her uniquely qualified to prepare for future threats. The transformation of humanity's galactic status became official when the Council designated Earth as a protector species, with authority to respond to extinction-level threats. The same representatives who had dismissed human capabilities now competed to offer alliance treaties. Master Chief CEO established training academies on multiple worlds to teach other species the human approach to warfare. His curriculum emphasized psychological preparation and tactical flexibility, rather than technological superiority. The long-term consequences of human victory extended beyond military considerations as galactic civilization began adopting Deathworld perspectives on survival and cooperation. Species that had focused on individual preservation learned the value of group sacrifice for common objectives. Fleet Admiral O delivered his final report to Earth Command, while human fleets established permanent patrols throughout the galaxy. His words summarized the lesson that Deathworld evolution had taught civilized species about the price of protection. The galaxy had learned that when extinction threatened and diplomacy failed, there remained one option that had never been tried. Call for the children of Deathworlds and watch them answer with calculated savagery, tempered by protective instinct. The universe had found its guardians among the species everyone had dismissed as primitive.